Hey everyone, so good to see you and actually not see you. I'm really glad to be here at the Polyglot Gathering, be one of the speakers. And I'm really, really glad that this event is happening, even though because of the COVID situation in the world, we cannot be meeting online, in real life right now, which I would really, really enjoy because I've been to the last 5 or 6 gatherings. I've organized 2 of them in 2017 and 2018 together with Peter Balázs and most of the people on the current team. And this is one of my favorite events in the world because I just love to meet fellow polyglots, language lovers, and to talk about languages, to live languages, and just hang out with nice people. So I'm glad that even though we cannot meet live and we cannot be hanging out like this right now, drinking wine, enjoying good food, and being next to each other in the talks and enjoying these talks together and all this free time. I'm really glad that we are still meeting this time and that we can share our know-how and love for languages in an online version. As a former main organizer of the Polyglot Gathering, let me just say that I'm really, really impressed with what this team has prepared. I checked out the platform and I was like, wow, how did the guys manage to do this in such a short time, on such a short notice? Everything seems to be running really perfectly, and I'm really hats off to the organizing team for putting this all together. Let me briefly introduce myself before I go to the 9 practical tips or practical lessons that I've learned from learning my 9 languages. I professionally, I'm an interpreter. I studied interpreting with English and German. And I interpreted a few interesting people. One of the more known ones is Tony Robbins. And this was my dream job for 6 years. I really loved it. But then I actually found passion in something else. I created my own project called Language Mentoring. And this is my way of helping people learn languages by themselves. So this is now my full-time job. Some of you may know me from the previous Polyglot gatherings where, as I mentioned, I organized 2 of them. And some of you may have seen my TED Talk, which is 10 minutes long and tells you all the secrets of learning a language and even mentions the Polyglot Gathering and shows a picture of us together in Bratislava in 2018. So if you haven't seen the TED Talk, maybe you may want to watch it afterwards. Let's get to the 9 practical tips from learning my 9 languages. I will briefly tell you some stories from all of these languages because every single one that I've learned has taught me something about learning languages in general and sometimes even about life. So I will try to make this as practical and useful for you as well because I think these things apply not only to the particular languages which you see in the picture, but also to basically any language, to learning languages in general. So let me start with the first language, and that's English. I started with it when I was 11 years old, and it was the school subject I had at school. And I remember walking into the classroom one day. We were in our 3rd year of learning English, and I remember seeing a classmate of mine reading a book in English. And I looked at her like, what is this? How can you be reading Harry Potter in English? And I just couldn't believe that she was reading it because it was a book, an authentic book, a material used for English speaking children, not for Slovaks who are just learning. And I couldn't understand it because I thought, we are just beginners. We are just getting to the intermediate level. It's impossible we cannot read a book. And what I was even more shocked about is that this classmate of mine was much worse at English than I was. She had much worse grades, and I couldn't grasp it. And she told me, you know, Lydia, I actually it seemed difficult at the beginning, but then I really know the book well because I read it many times in Slovak, so I guessed a lot of the stuff. And then the more I kept reading, the more I understood. And now by the end of the book, I actually understand this pretty well. So I said, if she can do it, I can do it. This was kind of a challenge accepted type of situation. And I remember going to the bookstore and buying my own version, my own book of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, number 3. It was also my favorite book because you see, we were growing up with Harry Potter, so everybody loved the book and knew it. And so I knew the Slovak book too. And I started reading it, and just like Henya, my classmate, she was right. I started to understand more and more. On the first pages, it was pretty bad. Okay, it was a lot of the words which some of the words which I understood were mostly names, like Harry, Dumbledore, Hogwarts. But as I read on, I understood more and more of it. And really, by the end of the book, I actually read the book almost without any problems in English. And this was a huge, huge breakthrough for me because I realized that you don't need to wait till you're really advanced to use authentic resources, especially if those resources are something that you love, that you like, that you enjoy, and even that you know from other languages, such as your mother tongue. It works really well, and you can easily use authentic resources and just spend a lot of time with them, be patient, and it will pay off. That was a huge, huge takeaway I had from my first language. My second language was German, and I started it when I was 15. It was not really a language I would choose myself. It was more of a, you have to pick a second language at school, and I ended up in the German class. And I'll be honest with you guys, I did not like German at the beginning at all. I actually even hated it, I would say. I didn't like the sound of it, the grammar sounded too complicated. I didn't have any personal approach or any special attitude to positive attitude to this language. And yeah, I kind of just went to the classes. But then, after 2 years of learning it, I realized that I have 2 more years until the end of the high school, and I will go to the university. And I realized that I want to be an interpreter, work with English, which was my favorite subject, and I loved it. But in order to work with, to study, to be an interpreter, I need two languages. So I really need to get my German to a decent level in 2 years. So that was very good motivation. And I realized that what I had available at home was German TV stations. In Slovakia, we had a lot of them, ProSieben, Sat.1, and many others. So I decided to watch TV. I turned on the TV, very excited, and I started watching. And after a few minutes, nothing. I couldn't understand almost anything, and it was devastating. I knew that it was the German language because I understood a few words like ja, nein, natürlich, something like that. But otherwise, I couldn't grasp what it was about, what they were talking about. I couldn't get the context. After 2 years of just attending classes in the school education, you really don't get that much from watching a German TV series. So I switched to another channel after a few minutes and forgot about it. Now, a few days passed, and I never turned on the TV station, the German TV station again, because I didn't like it. I didn't feel motivated. I felt like it was too much. But after a few days, I again realized, but I do need to work on my German, and I only have 2 years. I cannot just wait. Nothing will improve if I don't do anything, right? So I decided to create a little trick for myself. I put a little sheet on the wall above my desk, and I told myself that I will force myself to watch the German TV for 30 minutes a day, no matter what. And if I manage to do that, I will take a huge felt tip pen and I will make a huge tick sign to the special window for the day to reward myself, to feel good about myself. And believe it or not, this actually worked really, really well because just in order to be able to fill in that little window with a tick, I started watching every day. Even if I didn't understand, I was like, I will sit in front of the TV and, I will do it for 30 minutes every day and we'll see where that takes me. And what really, really surprised me afterwards is that after a few weeks, I started to actually understand pretty well. And I started to follow the series. I watched Friends in German. I watched a few other series. I was looking forward to watching the next episode. And I understood more and more of it. And it was really, really exciting. So, what this taught me is that a systematic plan can really do wonders in a few weeks. Because if you want to learn a language, you need to find a way to really expose yourself to the language, right? There is no shortcut. You cannot do it overnight. You cannot do it in a week. You need to actually steadily expose yourself to the language, for example, by watching TV. And the more you do it, the better you are, the more you understand. So this simple chart actually changed my language learning and helped me a lot in learning other languages in the future as well. So that was my lesson from learning German. Now let's get to Spanish, my third language. This was a special one. This was the first language that I tried to learn without any teachers, courses, language courses, school, nothing. It was just me and the language. And of course, I didn't know how to do it, so I failed 3 times. My first attempts were when I was a teenager. I tried it with a book. I tried learning vocabulary in the school, old-fashioned way. I tried a language course with 25 people in the classroom, didn't work out, surprise, surprise. And afterwards, I just thought to myself, you know what, I will not try to learn the language. I'll just try to have fun with it, enjoy it. I really love the sound of Spanish. So what I did was I downloaded an audiobook and an ebook at the same time, and I decided to listen to the audiobook and read the ebook every day for 20-25 minutes, just like with German. And you will not believe what resource I chose for this one. It will be a shock. Harry Potter again. Harry Potter actually changed my language learning a lot when I think of it now. So I got the Harry Potter, the second part now, the Chamber of Secrets, and every day I would sit at my desk and listen to the audiobook and watch the text. It was just for fun. It was like, oh my god, this is the language I don't understand, and it's fun. And I had some basics from trying to learn the language. I understood basic grammar and some maybe vocabulary of, I don't know, 500 words or so I could get by. But it was fascinating. At the beginning, it was like, wow, I understand, a name here and a name there, and now I understand a little word here and a little phrase, a sentence, and oh, I understood the dialogue. I started to understand more and more of it. And again, by the end of the book, Spanish sounded really natural and easy, and this is just such a fascinating feeling. I don't know if you guys know it, if you've had it with some languages, but I love this state of like getting into the flow of learning the language and understanding it, even if you cannot really know what all the individual words are like and what they mean. You get what it is about, and it's a wonderful feeling. So I had this with Spanish, and then after half a year, I actually managed to have a decent conversation, not just by reading Harry Potter. I want to stress this. I'm always picking just one of the methods that I used. This was not the only thing I did, obviously, but it helped me to actually have a decent conversation in half a year, and then within 2 years, I got it to a very, very decent level. I don't have time to go into the details of this whole story of me learning different languages, but for example, with this Spanish one, I have a webinar. If you are interested in hearing more about this story of failures and how I figured out how to learn languages, then you can watch my webinar at languagementoring.com, and you can find out more about that. So with Spanish, I learned that actually having materials which are fun and doing it more for the fun of it than for the sake of learning a language, it actually worked much, much better. So that was my lesson from Spanish. Let's move on to Polish. So 2 years later, I realized, okay, I learned Spanish by myself. That's pretty cool. Let's see if that works with another language, right? And I picked Polish. And I thought that this would take me much less time because, come on, it's Polish. I'm a Slovak. These languages are really similar. I already understand like 30% just because they're two Slavic languages. All Slovaks also understand Czech. So it was Czech, Slovak, and Polish. We have a lot of words in common. The grammar is similar. I'll be a piece of cake, right? Well, it actually turned out to be my most difficult language, to be honest. And that's because of two reasons. The first of them are Polish false friends. Now, I would love to see how many of you guys watching this right now speak at least two Slavic languages. I would love you to raise your hands, but as I don't really see you, it doesn't make sense. So anyway, let's forget about that. If you know two Slavic languages, you know that there are a lot of false friends, false amis, words which are very similar, but actually have very different meanings. I'll give you a few examples. So for example, droga, the Polish word droga, means road in Polish. That's the meaning. But the Slovak word droga means a drug. So when a Slovak guy comes to Poland and he sees a car with something like pomoc drogowa, like drug aid, we go like, what is this country about? Like, do they have so many drug addicts that they need special cars to help them or something? That just sounds really weird, right? Another funny word is prasa. So in Polish, that's press. But in Slovak, the same word, exactly the same word, actually means a pig. So it's also funny when you see like a Polish TV crew with T-shirts with big prasa on them, and you go like, what is this about? What is this game? Poklad, for example, means deck of a ship. But for us Slovaks, poklad is a treasure. And it's just a small difference in the L letter, as you can see. Odporný is a funny one because it's a very nice word, like someone is resistant to something. It's a good quality. But in Slovak, if you are odporný, it's like, oof, horrible, repulsive. That's not a good word at all. Čerstvý chleb is something that we Slovaks love. We would eat it all the time, and we don't want anything else than čerstvý chleb because it's fresh bread. But in Poland, that actually means stale, old bread that you want to throw away. So the Poles go like, "Hey, you eat čerstvý chleb? What is that about?" And of course, I have to mention the famous word "szukać," which is a very innocent word in Polish. It means to look for something, someone. In Slovak, unfortunately, it has a more vulgar meaning. It means to have sexual intercourse. I will not say this word, obviously. And again, there are funny situations when a Polish person says like, "Hey, have you seen my dog? I'm looking for my dog." And all the Slovaks go like, "Okay." So there are a lot of love, a lot of false friends between Polish and Slovak. And what this means in practice is that when you're trying to speak in Polish, you think of a word, and then you stop for a minute thinking, "Ooh, is this Slovak or is this Polish? Which meaning do I want to use?" And then Czech comes in. It's like, "Oh, wait, this word has a meaning of this, this, and this," and you need to actually stop for a half a second, quarter of a second, and think, "I want to talk about treasure, not about the deck of a ship." So this slows down the whole process a lot. And I understood that the only way to overcome this is to practice speaking a lot. So after I understood this, after the first half year of learning Polish, I understood there is no way around it. I have to practice speaking much more. So I got a tandem partner. I went to the Polish summer school. I started speaking Polish every day as much as possible. And it helped me a lot to actually overcome all these false friends. So my lesson which I took from this is that the only way to learn a language well is to speak it a lot. I think this is obvious to people who are successful at learning languages, but this is something I teach in my online courses all the time because people want to find a shortcut to learning a language without really speaking it. It doesn't exist. And I understood it even more with languages which seem to be even more similar to mine or to other languages I speak, but it becomes even more important to practice speaking because you need to make sure that this output is given a lot of practice so you don't think about the false friends too much. Let's move on to French. Now, 2 years later, again after Polish, I got Polish to a very decent level. I even interpreted for Slovakia's former first lady, Mrs. Gašparovičová, from Polish into Slovak, so it was on a very, very decent level. So that encouraged me to learn other languages. And after 2 years, I felt excited to start with a new project, French. And for the first 2 months, I was really excited about it. It was going well. But then 2 months later, something unexpected happened, and language learning turned out to be really difficult for me. What happened had nothing to do with languages. It had to do with my personal life. And I want to share this because I don't want to just speak about the language successes. I want to mention the language failures as well, because they're also a big part of the language learning journey, right? Well, I was going through a very rough breakup after several years of being in a long-term relationship, and it totally shattered me. It turned my world upside down. I was 23 years old. I had to move out and reinvent myself and figure out who I am without my ex-boyfriend, and it was just really, really tough. So at that time, I was trying to learn French, and I think I don't have to tell you much about the details. It didn't really work out. But the thing is, after a year from when I started learning French, I looked at where I am and I realized that I was a beginner and I was very disappointed with myself. And I was being very harsh on myself, thinking, "Hey, Lydia, you've learned these 4 languages really well. What's wrong with you? Is French so much more difficult?" I knew it wasn't, and I couldn't understand like what was the problem. Now, a few years later, I understand that I just wasn't in the emotional state to learn a language. And that's the lesson I took, and that's the lesson I really want to mention here and possibly start a discussion. Let's see if we have time afterwards to discuss these things. But I think it may not always be the perfect time to learn a language and to go on with a language project, even if we started very enthusiastically at the beginning. And it's very, very important to understand that that's okay. And we shouldn't be too harsh on ourselves. And I think we should just accept it and then just maybe take it easy and not be so ambitious, especially, and that's why I'm mentioning here at the Polyglot Gathering. I'm mentioning it specifically for those who actually learn a lot of languages, have a lot of language projects going on. They know it's pretty easy for them to learn a language, or they know how to do it, and then something like this happens. So I think that we should also mention the emotional or mental state that we are in. And I also know that in the polyglot community, there are a lot of people who have exactly the opposite experience and who will tell you that languages actually help them overcome a depression. And I know there are these two points of view, but I just wanted to share my experience. I'm generally a happy person, and this was the most difficult period of my life and not the best time to try and learn French. So that was my lesson from learning this language. Let's move on to the Slovak Sign Language. That was a project which I was just curious about. I found a language school who taught it in Slovakia, in Bratislava, and I was like, wow, that's fascinating. Let's learn how the deaf communicate. So I started attending a class once a week for 2 years. I stayed with it for 2 years, and I got actually pretty good at the language. I got to a very good B1 level. I think I was getting close to B2, but not quite. And that's exactly the problem. After 2 years, this language school ceased to exist. They stopped the course, and I couldn't continue by myself. With any other language, I probably could, but the Slovak Sign Language does not have any materials, online courses, books, or anything. So I was stuck. I didn't have enough friends in the deaf community to keep the language, so I stopped using it. And that was the problem, because today I am at a 0 level of the Slovak Sign Language. I cannot use it anymore. And that's because I didn't get behind the last wave. Let me explain what I mean by this. I've explained this in the previous talk. Sometimes you may have heard about this metaphor of mine, but I think it really, really sums up what language learning is about and how we should try to learn it to make sure we know it long term. So this is just like the Castaway movie with Tom Hanks, if you've seen it. When you start learning a language, you are on this island and you want to get to the wide ocean. So you build a raft, a little boat, and you start rowing and going towards that last wave, right? To get towards the ocean. But what happens is if you stop rowing, that means learning the language, putting it, giving it energy and exposing yourself to it, somewhere here, before you reach that last wave, the waves will drag you back towards the island and you will start from 0. That's exactly what happened to me with the Slovak Sign Language. I was actually doing pretty well. I was maybe somewhere here right before the last wave of the B2 level, or the comfortable fluency level, as Stephen Krashen and some other polyglots call it, but I didn't make it. So if I stopped being in touch with the language and stopped rowing, my boat was dragged back towards the island. And today I'm standing on the island, a beginner. If I want to learn the language, I need to put in all the energy again. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I think that if you cross that last wave, just like he did, Tom Hanks did in the movie, in the last attempt, he was not dragged back towards the island. He could roam on the sea, and he was picked by a ship. He was saved. And this is something that I've seen with my other languages as well. If I get it behind this wave, I don't need to practice every day. I don't need to keep my languages. This is what everybody keeps asking me, all the media and interviews, like, how do you keep all your languages? Do you have a routine with like 5 languages a day? And honestly, I don't. I usually learn 1 language at a time. I usually spend an hour with it a day, and that's it. And the reason is I always got my languages to behind the last wave. I don't do little projects where I learn the basics of 1 language and the basics of another and basics of another, because I know that if I don't use them, I'll be back to 0. And I like to learn for a long-term benefit, not just for enjoying the process of learning it. So that's why I also motivate people, encourage them to try and put all the effort into it until you get to the comfortable fluency level where the language will not be taken from you anymore, even if you don't use it for half a year, maybe 2 years. Of course, it will get a bit rusty, but if you activate it, you can easily get to your original level. I would say that's my experience with the other languages. I would love to see what you guys think about that in the discussion. If you have any questions, let me know. And let's get to my language number 7, Esperanto. Again, I would love to see how many Esperanto speakers there are right now. Like, raise your hands, but again, I cannot see it. So I will just suppose that it's actually quite a few, because I know the polyglot community is full of Esperanto lovers and speakers. This is an easy language to put into your little collection of languages because it just takes so little time to learn. It took me, and I couldn't believe it, 1 month of learning by myself and 1 week of attending the summer school of Esperanto that Peter mentioned in the opening ceremony. which was in Slovakia. And 1 week of just speaking Esperanto with Esperanto speakers, like 300 of them, all week long. I could see progress from 1 hour to another. It was incredible. I've never seen anything like this with any language I've learned. That's because Esperanto is incredibly simple. Let me show you why. In this chart, you see the words that are connected to the word health in here, like in English, Slovak, and other languages, right? Healthy, the adjective, the noun, the opposite, the noun of the opposite of health, etc., etc. Like patient, hospital, heal, fall ill, medicine. These are all the words you need to learn if you want to express something to do with being healthy, not being healthy, anything with this idea, right? There's how many, like 10 of these words, which are all different. And it doesn't even help you that you learn health and healthy, because you cannot apply it to any other words. You cannot say, oh, young and youngie, it doesn't work like that. You have to learn other words like youth and all the other special words. The same goes for all other languages, natural languages, basically, where you have different roots of words. Now, what I love about Esperanto, and I really love this, is you have the root of the word like health, healthy, sun, and then you know that all adjectives end in a, so it's sana. All nouns end in o, so it's sano, it's health. Mal sana, the prefix mal is used to express the opposite of something. So granda is big, mal granda is small. Sana is healthy, mal sana is not healthy. That means sick. Mal sano, again, a noun ending. That means it's unhealthiness. That means sickness. Then this is also funny. Ulo means the person who does something, right? So a person who is not healthy is malsanulo. That's a patient. Eo means the suffix for a place. This is a place for the person who is healthy not. That's a hospital. How amazing is that, right? This is like a puzzle. And Esperanto in this way is so easy to learn because you just learn this one thing and then you learn the endings and you can apply them to every single word. You just know whenever you see the word, you can actually decode it as long as you understand the prefix, suffix, and the root words. This was so cool when I found this out, and this is why you can learn Esperanto 5 or 10 times quicker than any other language. What I realized with this is that I actually took the role of a detective. I was a detective who was decoding the words, and this is how I learned Esperanto. It was like, oh wow, this is the grammar of Esperanto. You can read it in a lunch break, really, like 16, 17 rules. And then you look at the text. If you, I guarantee you guys, if you speak like 3 European languages and you learn the basics of Esperanto grammar, you can actually understand Esperanto text pretty well. It's crazy. You can understand it after the first lesson. And so I was decoding the individual words. I was looking at the text and thinking, oh, this is the Aeon meaning. Like, oh, this will be the summary of tools or the group of tools for eating. That means cutlery, and you check it like, yeah, this is actually cutlery. So the detective mode, I think, is really, really useful when learning a language. And I realized that I didn't only apply it in Esperanto, I also applied it in other languages. When I was watching German TV, for example, I was watching and I was waiting for those few words which I understood. And I celebrated the victory of understanding the few words. I didn't concentrate on the words I didn't know. I fully concentrated on the ones I did know. And this is, I think, the right approach to learning a language because you remain positive. You are not devastated by, oh, there are so many words which I don't understand, and I am not good enough. I cannot use authentic materials. I cannot read a book or watch a series. No, you focus on the words which you do know and you try to decode the ones which you don't know based on the context. You try guessing, you try waiting to see if you get more context. And I think this approach to learning a language, this detective mode of learning a language, is amazing. And that's when language learning is fun, right? Not focusing on the mistakes and on the words which you don't know, but focusing on the ones which you do know. With Esperanto, this was super easy because it's such a logical language, like a puzzle, where if you have a few hints, you can easily follow, but it's also quite possible with other languages. Let's move on to Russian. By the way, the detective mode is really well applicable to Russian as well. Many people ask me, like, oh, Lydia, how did you learn the Cyrillic alphabet? What are the secret methods and apps? And tell me, the secrets. And I always go like, what do you mean? You play the decoding game, right? You get the list of the alphabet, and you get a text, a Russian text, no matter what it is. And then you go first word, letter by letter, trying to decode what it is, trying to read it. And when you do it at the beginning, you take a lot of time, it's very slow, but then you become faster and faster because you don't need to check in the alphabet all the time. So you just go and you start reading, and it's more fluent and faster. And by the, I don't know, by the end of the week, you read pretty fluently. There's really no magic to it. So the decoding game, the decoding mode actually applies to anything in learning a language. By the way, with Russian, I decided to learn Russian because I really wanted to travel. First of all, to Moscow and St. Petersburg, and then in 2 years, I took a trip from Moscow to Mongolia, the Trans-Siberian Express. And when I went to Moscow, after 1 year of learning, it was magical what happened the first weekend. I went to Moscow and I couldn't really speak really well. But after 2 days of exposing myself to only Russian speakers and speaking intensively, by the end of the weekend, I was actually very fluent, and I could suddenly speak Russian really, really well. Now, many people who saw me, who met me there at the weekend, thought like, "This is magic. I talked to you on Friday, and you were quite hesitant. You were unsure. You were really slow in answering. But now you are so confident. Like, what happened? This is magic. This is magical talent." I want to explain to you what actually happened there because it's quite logical, and I'm sure many of you will relate to it. And I will use the beautiful chart of James Clear from Atomic Habits, which, by the way, is an amazing book. So let me explain this to you. This axis is about the results, like what do you expect to learn to get in the language. And this is the time. So what we think should happen is that we start learning and the results go up linearly, right? They go up, 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 and we get better every day. The moment you start learning, you just get better linearly. What actually happens, unfortunately, is this one here. So you start learning, you learn, nothing, no results, zero. This is where many people give up, thinking, "Oh, I'm not talented to learn a language. Oh, this is not for me. I want to have the magical talent that Lydia has, but I cannot do this." But the trick is to just wait, right? You need to give it the energy, row your boat till you get to the last wave, and just learn, and the results will show. At the beginning, though, they will not be as good as you expected. That's why James Clear says this is the valley of disappointment, because your results here should have been here. You should have spoken better English and French and German by now, but you don't, right? So you keep learning, and this is the magical point. This is where magic happens because you suddenly start having much better results than what you expected. And this is the point where many people, like the ones who met me in Russia, thought like, "Oh wow, Lydia, you are so talented. In 2 days, you made a huge progress. This is impossible. This is, magic." But actually, they didn't see all the work I put into my Russian learning before that, because obviously nothing like that would have happened if I didn't spend all these hours, going through the Gold List method, watching Russian TV series like Kuchnia, for example, reading books in Russian, and just learning vocabulary and putting a lot of effort into it. But this is my favorite moment in language learning. When this starts happening, it's like, "Oh wow, I'm doing so much progress in such a short time." It's wonderful. This is the flow state that I love in learning a language. But people need to make sure they are patient enough to get here, right? So with Russian, I understood that it definitely pays off to work on your language. The results will show later, but you just need to be patient, right? And I think that this chart really sums it up very, very nicely. Okay, let's get to the final language, and that's Swahili. I started learning it 2 years ago, and I already finished with that project after a year and a few months, because I wanted to travel to Tanzania and I couldn't for health reasons. Anyway, I lost my motivation and I am back on the island. So this language and the Slovak sign language, unfortunately, are the ones that I didn't get over that last wave, but it was still really, really interesting to learn Swahili because I learned a lot. This was my teacher, Hamdi, from italki, and we had a lot of lessons together. And it was in these lessons that I understood that it doesn't really matter how many languages you have learned. You always have to go through the beginnings, which are not easy, right? This is the valley of disappointment. You need to get to that point. And I felt like, me, Tarzan, you, Jane, communicating in a very simple way, not really being very or sounding very intelligent, but this is the way we have to. This is what we have to accept. It has not helped me that it was my ninth language. I had to learn the language just the same way as I would have learned my first one. What helped me definitely is my confidence in learning languages, but the beginnings are always tough. They're always difficult. You have to go through this period of, okay, I'm learning this language. I don't understand almost anything. But again, you keep the positive detective mode of thinking, and you go like, oh, I understand this word. And I think this could be, this could mean this and that. And I think that helps immensely to learn a language. So the beginnings are always difficult, whether it's your first or your ninth language. That was my lesson from Swahili. So, to sum it up, these are the 9 practical lessons from learning my 9 languages. If you wanted to take notes or something, you might want to take a screenshot now. That's the advantage of being at a polyglot gathering online. You don't have to take your phone and try to match it to the screen, which is too far away. So I believe these things work in general. I experienced it myself in language learning, and what I loved is that every single language taught me something about language learning in general, which I applied later on and which I now teach at language mentoring to my clients. So to sum it up, these were 9 lessons, but I actually have a philosophy of putting them all into 4 pillars of my language learning philosophy. And if you watch my TED Talk, then this will sound quite familiar. First of all, language learning needs to be fun. It doesn't need to be the most fun activity you've ever done in your life, but you need to find a way how to enjoy it. Use the resources you like, use the methods you prefer. Make sure you enjoy the process in one way or another. Have a lot of contact with the language. In order to get across the last wave, there's a lot of hours of exposure you need with the language and a lot of output, of course, speaking and writing. And I personally, as I said, learn a language every 2 years. I usually spend an hour a day. So I think roughly, very roughly, it takes about 500 hours of contact to reach that level. But I'm speaking of European languages. I don't have that much experience learning non-European languages, so take it with a pinch of salt. The third pillar is having successful or effective methods. It worked for me because I listened and read Harry Potter at the same time. I understood with Polish I need to speak and practice speaking in order to find a way around these false friends in my mind. And that's why it worked. And finally, I had a system in my language learning. For example, with German, I had a little accountability sheet which I put on the wall. With any other language, I actually use some digital forms of motivating myself. I always create a plan. I make sure I know what I want to do in the next learning period. Because if I just wait and see if I wake up and if I feel like learning, I might or I might not. So that's why these 4 pillars, having fun, contact, effective methods, and a system, this is what for me is the recipe to learning any language. And this is why it's also the basis of my language mentoring philosophy. So that's all, folks. Thank you very much for watching this. And if you want to stay in touch, then check out my website, languagementoring.com. You can find us, me, and together with my team on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We'll be happy to stay in touch. And of course, during the gathering, I will be around if anybody wants to talk. And I'm also very happy to answer your questions now. And I'm glad we made it in time. I was worried that I would speak too much with the individual lessons. So let me go through your questions. I'll pick some and we can go through the things that I think would understand most people. For example, second one, when reading books in a language you are learning, is it better to read out loud? I think in language learning in general, anything you do out loud is always good. It's always better because you make sure you focus fully. I think that when you just read and your mind can just go to something else, like what am I going to eat tomorrow or whatever. So I think reading out loud helps us stay focused, and also it definitely helps to practice your vocal cords and the speech organs to actually say these things. And also with languages such as French, English, even Russian, the pronunciation is very different from what you see written sometimes. So it's very, very good to practice that. And you may realize that when you read out loud, you find a word which you understand when you see it, but you have no clue how to pronounce it. Like hierarchy, for example, in English. I struggled with that one for a long time. And when you read out loud, you actually go like, huh, I understand this one because it sounds similar to me in Slovak, but how do I pronounce it? And you check it. So yeah, if it's possible, I would definitely say read out loud as much as you can. But I wouldn't say you should read out loud all the time when you read a book. Just make it maybe systematically some part of your language learning practice. So I hope that answered the question. Okay, back to reading. Do you suggest to read more times the same book or to change a book every time? Do you suggest to look new words in a dictionary or not? So yes, I think there are two ways of two methods. I'm wondering how deep to go into this. There's intensive and extensive reading, right? If you want to practice reading, just in order to read as much as possible and read as many books because you also always like novel content, then I would say don't read anything twice or don't go too deep into the text. Just go through the text and try to understand the basics of it, and then move on to the other book. That's extensive reading. Intensive reading is where you actually read very slowly. You come back to the text, you go back to the paragraph, or you decode it. You really go into detail. You underline phrases. You check in a dictionary. That's a different type of reading. Both of them are great, but they also serve different purposes. The extensive reading is great for being exposed to the language and being exposed passively, just to see the words in context and maybe expanding your passive vocabulary. The intensive reading is the best one for expanding your vocabulary, and it is much slower. So when you put it into your language learning plan, you should definitely make sure you count the time it will take you. So with intensive reading, you may just read one page a day, and it will take you even half an hour. With extensive reading, I again suggest to underline a certain amount of words, such as maybe 3 new expressions on a page, which you then put into your Anki flashcards or your Gold List book or any other method you have for learning vocabulary. Oh my God, there's so many questions. I spoke about reading too much. Let me see, with 3 minutes, let me just... Okay. Yeah, I guess many people actually want to ask the question because I get asked that a lot. What is the language I want to learn or my current project? So right now, I'm not learning a language right now. I don't need to always learn a language. I need to make sure I have good motivation to learn one. And I would like to learn Brazilian Portuguese in the future, but not necessarily right now. So we'll see where that takes me. Right now, I'm focusing full time on business, so not learning any language right now. Okay, interesting question. For people who want to learn their first Slavic language, would you recommend to start with Polish? Why or why not? No, actually, I wouldn't. I think Polish is pretty tricky because of the sounds that there are, all these all these complicated sounds that for many people, especially maybe Spanish speakers or English speakers, is quite tricky just to pronounce. And also the spelling is very, very difficult. So I would actually recommend people to start with Slovak, not because I'm Slovak, but because this is, I think, seen as the Esperanto of Slavic languages. Many other Slavic languages base their vocabulary in Slovak, so a lot of other Slavic nations understand Slovak more than they would understand the other Slavic languages. So yeah, so that's what I would recommend. And there is a great website for that called slovake.eu. I think that's correct, slovake.eu. That's one of the projects of Petr Balaš, and so you can check that out. That's a free course of learning Slovak. Yes, thank you very much for putting it on the screen. Okay, and how I learn words and how not to forget them. Flashcards or something else. Many of you know that my absolutely favorite method is the Gold List method. And I know that the author of the method, David James, is also with us at this Polyglot gathering, as he's been with, I think, all other Polyglot gatherings. We even had a talk together about this, a workshop about this method in, I think, 2 years ago. So this is a wonderful, wonderful method where you just write down words in a notebook, and then you filter them, you distill them after 2 weeks, and you find out that you somehow magically remembered 30% of the words. It's based on learning subconsciously, and I don't have time to go into detail, obviously, But if you want to check out more about that, then you can get my ebook on languagementoring.com and learn how to use this amazing method for free in practice. So I hope that helps the Goldlist method. Yeah, thank you very much, Michal, for putting it on the screen. And I think that's it, guys. I will be around, try to go into the chat rooms and try to stay in touch. And I hope to see you guys all in Poland next year, or at the Polyglot Conference this year, if it happens, not in an online form, or at Langfest in Canada. We'll see at which event I'll get to meet you. It was a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for all the questions and for bearing with me. And I hope to see you around. Bye bye.